कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे Hare Krishna. So after a series of questions on one of the most exhaustive topics as one could have ever imagined, put forth by Vidura to Maitreya Muni. So Maitreya Muni in this chapter he begins to answer the questions of Vidura, and the chapter is entitled Manifestation of Brahma from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. So predominantly the questions are pertaining to creation and subcreation. Maitreya Uvacha Satsevaniya Bhatapurvamso Yallok Yallokapala Bhagavat Pradhana Bhavuvithe Ajit Kirtimalam Pade Pade Nutanasya Bhikshana. The great sage Maitreya Muni said to Vidura, the royal dynasty of King Puru is worthy to serve the pure devotees, because all the descendants of that family are devoted to the personality of Godhead. You are also born in that family. It is wonderful that because of your attempt, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are becoming newer and newer at every moment. He says that Pade Pade Nutana Sya Asya Bhikshana. So, by his inquisitiveness to know more and to inquire more, the transcendental pastimes which have been glorified before has now become very renewed every moment. The great sage Maitreya thanked Vidur and praised him by reference to his family glories. The Puru dynasty was full of devotees of the personality of Godhead and was therefore glorious, because they are not attached to the impersonal Brahman or to the localized Paramatma, but they are directly attached to Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. They were worthy of to render service to the Lord and his pure devotees, because Vidur was one of the descendants of that family. Naturally, he engaged in spreading wide the ever new glories of the Lord. Maitreya felt happy to have such glorious company as Vidura. He considered the company of Vidura most desirable, because such association can accelerate one's dormant propensities for devotional service. Soaham nirnam shula sukhaya dukkha mahadgatanam piramayasya pravartaye bhagavatam puranam yad aha sakshat bhagwan rishabhaya. Let me now begin speaking on the Bhagavad Puran, which was directly spoken to the great sages by the personality of Godhead, for the benefits of those who are entangled in extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure. The sage Maitreya proposed to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam because it was specially compiled and has traditionally come down in the disciplic succession to provide the solution to all problems of human society. Only one who is fortunate can have the opportunity to reach Srimad Bhagavatam. Or even here, those who are extremely fortunate, whose piety based on devotional service has been profusely accumulated, then only it is possible to hear, read, or share Srimad Bhagavatam. those who are only one who is fortunate can have the opportunity to hear Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of pure devotees of the Lord. Under the spell of the material energy, the living entities are entrapped in the borders of many difficulties simply for the sake of little bit of material happiness. They engage in fruitive activities not knowing the implications. Under the false impression that the body is the self, the foolish living entities become attached to so many things, thinking they can relate with such material paraphernalia forever. This gross misconception of life is so strong that a person suffers continually, life after life, under the external energy of the Lord. If one comes in contact with both the book Bhagavad and the devotee Bhagavad, who knows what the Bhagavatam is, then such a fortunate man gets out of the material entanglement. Therefore, Srimad Muni, out of compassion for the suffering man in the world, proposes to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam, first and last. Asinam uruyan bhagavantam adyam sankarshanam devam akuntha satvam vivitsavas tatvamatha parasya kumara mukhya munyo anvapicham. Some time ago, being inquisitive to know, Sanat Kumar, the chief of the boy saints, before Kumara, accompanied by other great sages, inquired exactly as you have about the truth regarding Vasudeva, the supreme from Lord Sankarshan, who was seated in the bottom of the universe. This is the clarification of the statement that the Lord spoke directly on the Srimad Bhagavatam. When and unto whom the Bhagavatam was spoken is explained herewith. Questions similar to those put forward by Vidura were asked by great sages like Sanat Kumar and Lord Shankarshan. The plenary expansion of Lord Vasudeva answered them. So this is another lineage of Srimad Bhagavatam. But this lineage of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the questions are being asked by the four Kumaras, and it will be spoken by Lord Sankarshan. Lord Sankarshan will speak to the Sanat Kumars, and these four Kumaras will speak further to the sages. Swamevadhishnayam bahumanayantam Swamevadhishnayam bahumanayantam Yad Vasudeva abhidiham amananti Pratyagrita sambuja kosamisha Unmilyantam vidhud hodayaya. At that time, Lord Sankarshan was meditating upon the Supreme Lord, whom the learned esteem as Lord Vasudeva. But for the sake of the advancement of the great sages, he slightly opened his lotus-like eyes and began to speak. Swardhuni uda adraha swajata kalpe upasprishantas charanopadhana padmamya archanti ahiraj kanya saprema nana balibhi vararatha. The sages came from the higher planets, from the highest planets, down to the lower region to the water of the Ganges. Therefore, sorry. The sages came from the highest planets down to the lower region, to the water of the Ganges. And therefore, the hair on their heads was wet. They touched the lotus feet of the Lord, which are worshipped. Which sages came from the highest planet? Saying that the sages came from the highest planet. Who are the sages? Manini Mataji, which sages came from the highest planet?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yeah.
Son Kumaras, four Kumaras.
Four Kumaras led by Sanatana. Very good. Through the water of the Ganges, and therefore the hair on their head was wet. They touched the lotus feet of the Lord, which are worshipped with various paraphernalia by the daughters of the serpent king when they desire good husbands. The Ganges water flows directly from the lotus feet of Vishnu. That is why it is also called Vishnu Padi. And its fourth runs from the highest planet of the universe down to the lowest. The sages came down from Swarloka. The sages came down from the Satyaloka by taking advantage of the flowing water, a process of transportation made possible by the power of mystic yoga. If a river flows thousands and thousands of miles, a perfect yogi can at once transport himself from one place to another simply by dipping in its water. The Ganges is the only celestial river which flows throughout the universe, and great sages travel all around the universe. The Ganges is the only celestial river which flows throughout the universe, and great sages travel all over the universe via the sacred river. The statement that the hair was wet indicates that it had been directly moistened by the Ganges, the water originating from the lotus feet of Vishnu. Whoever touches the water of Ganges to his head surely touches the lotus feet of the Lord directly, and thus becomes free from all effects of sinful acts. If after taking a bath in the Ganges and being washed of all sins, a man guard himself against committing further sinful acts, then certainly he is delivered. But if he again takes up the sinful activity, his bath in the Ganges is as good as that of the elephant, who nicely takes his bath in river, but later spoils the whole thing by covering himself with the dust on the land. Muhu grihanta vachasanuraga skhalat padena स्खलत् पादेनस्य कृतानि तद्विना कीरिता सहर्षा मणिप्रवेका प्रदोयतीता उद्दमा फल सहर्षा. The four Kumaras, headed by Sanat Kumar, who all knew the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, glorified the Lord in rhythmic accent and selected words full of affection and love. At that time, Lord Sankarsana, with these thousands of raised hoods, began to radiate an effulgence from the glowing stone on his head. The Lord is sometimes addressed as Uttam Shloke, which means one who is worshipped with selected words by devotees. A profusion of such selected words come from the devotee who is fully absorbed in affection and love for the devotional service of the Lord. There are many instances in which even a small boy was a great devotee. There are many instances in which even a small boy who was a great devotee of the Lord could offer excellent prayers in the choicest words for glorification of the pastime of the Lord. In other words, without the development of fine affection and love, one cannot offer praise to the Lord very loudly. प्रोक्तम किलायते भगवतोत्तमयाने अमानेन निवृत्ति धर्माभिहृतयायतेन सनत कुमारस्य सचाह पृष्ठा सांख्यायेन प्रोक्तम किलेत भगवत आत्मेन निवृत्त धर्म अभिरतया तेन सनत कुमारस्य चाह पृष्ठा सांख्या अनन्यंगाधिता वृताया. Lord Sankarshan thus spoke the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam to the great sage Sanat Kumar, who had already taken the vow of renunciation. Sanat Kumar also in his turn, when inquired by Sankhyayan Muni, this is the lineage. Sankarshan, Lord Sankarshan, and from Lord Sankarshan, it is coming to Sanat Kumar, and from Sanat Kumar, it is coming to Sankhyayan Muni. Sanat Kumar also in his turn, when inquired by Sankhyayan Muni, explained Srimad Bhagavatam as he had learned from Srimad Bhagavatam as he had heard it from Sankarsana, Sankhyayan. This was the parampara system, although Sanat Kumar, the well-known great saintly Kumar, was in the perfect stage of life, still he heard the message of Srimad Bhagavatam from Lord Sankarshan. Similarly, when Sanat Kumar was questioned by Sankhyayan Rishi, the Kumar spoke to him the same message he had heard from Lord Sankarshan. In other words, unless one hears from the proper authority, one cannot become a preacher. Very important. Unless one hears from the proper authority, one cannot become a preacher. Sorry. In other words, unless one hears from the proper authority, one cannot become a preacher. In devotional service, therefore, 2 items out of 9, namely hearing and chanting, are most important. Without hearing nicely, one cannot preach the message of Vedic knowledge. Hare Krishna. I'll stop now. Cannot continue. This is my 4th class today. Morning Bhagavatam class, Chetan Charitamrita class in the temple hall, then 2 Bhakti Shastri classes. On this class, I'm completely exhausted. And in between, so many guests also came today. Hare Krishna. If you have any question, please ask. You should ask some questions, some genuine questions, some awakening should be there. Okay then, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Prabhupada.